A survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse has come forward with new allegations describing how she was allegedly recruited in 2004, claiming she was manipulated and threatened into silence through fear and coercion, including threats involving her family's medical care. The survivor says this created what she describes as a long cycle of psychological control and abuse that lasted for years. In recent commentary, concerns have been raised over how survivors are being represented in the ongoing public discussion, especially after unexpected political remarks entered the conversation. Some survivors say they were surprised by the direction the discourse has taken, arguing that it has shifted away from accountability and toward political framing. According to survivor advocates, there is growing frustration that victims are being placed at the center of public debate while investigations remain incomplete. They argue that instead of public pressure on survivors, the focus should remain on formal investigations conducted by law enforcement agencies. Critics of the current process say the situation reflects confusion and inconsistency in how the case is being handled, with repeated calls for transparency and clearer legal procedures. They emphasize that responsibility should lie with institutions such as the Department of Justice and the FBI to ensure proper investigation and accountability. A key point of debate is a proposal suggesting that survivors should publicly testify before Congress and have their accounts entered into the official congressional record. While some view this as a path toward truth and acknowledgement, others strongly disagree. Survivor advocates warn that public testimony in such a format could expose victims to serious risks, including legal retaliation, defamation claims, and personal safety threats. They argue that many survivors are still vulnerable and fear being identified, tracked, or harassed if forced into open hearings. There are also ongoing concerns about the release and handling of investigative files. Advocates say they have repeatedly requested full transparency, stating that important details may still be withheld or heavily redacted, potentially shielding individuals involved in the broader network. They argue that despite multiple rounds of review, key information remains unclear and questions persist about why certain names or details are removed while others remain accessible. This, they say, undermines trust in the process and raises concerns about whether accountability is being applied consistently. Some survivors insist the issue is not political, but rather a matter of justice and public transparency. They continue to call for full file releases and renewed investigations to ensure no individuals involved are protected by status or influence. Attention has also turned to former and current officials involved in legal decisions connected to the case. Lawmakers have debated whether certain figures should be called to testify about past agreements and legal procedures, including how earlier plea arrangements were handled and whether they were appropriate. Critics argue that past decisions may have contributed to leniency in the handling of key individuals connected to the case, raising questions about fairness and consistency in the justice process. Survivors and advocates say one of the biggest unresolved issues is the lack of clarity around how investigative decisions were made, particularly regarding redactions and file management. They insist the public deserves answers about why certain protections were granted and whether they were justified. As the debate continues, survivors maintain their central demand remains unchanged: full transparency, complete investigations, and accountability for all individuals involved, regardless of power or position. For them, the issue remains rooted not in politics, but in justice, safety, and truth.